Okay, so ready to dive in? Today we're going to unpack some fascinating stuff, really thought-provoking ideas.
Always up for a good deep dive. Lay it on me.
This one comes from Arnold Blair, and he really gets you thinking about, well, about entwined snakes, that ancient symbol, but specifically how they tie into the spiritual side of things, the healing journey.
Ah, entwined snakes. You're talking about stuff like Nergal's staff, that Mesopotamian deity, right?
Exactly. He uses that imagery a lot. Nergal with his staff, those snakes winding around it. Blair's piece, it's called The Serpent's Embrace, Unraveling the Mystery of Entwined Snakes.
Catchy title. Okay, so where do we start unraveling this mystery?
Well, the first thing that struck me when reading Blair was how he shifts your whole perspective on Nergal's staff. Like, you
Yeah.
initially think, okay, symbol of power, right? Authority. But Blair, he wants us to think deeper, more spiritual.
Makes sense. Nergal's connected to the underworld, even plague.
Hmm.
Not exactly light and fluffy stuff.
Not at all. And that's where those entwined snakes come in. Blair interprets them as representing Nergal's spiritual mastery. Mastery over both life and death, which, given Nergal's whole vibe, makes a lot of sense.
Almost like Nergal becomes this, I don't know, spiritual guide through those transitions.
Mm.
Not just the god of the underworld, but the one who understands that boundary between worlds.
Yeah, that threshold, like a guardian of the in-between.
Mm.
Really reframes how you see him. And then Blair goes on about the serpent itself, talks about it being this symbol of, like, primal energy, hidden knowledge.
Right, that idea that this serpent holds secrets. You see that across so many cultures, don't you? This idea of the serpent knowing things we don't.
Absolutely. And so when you see that staff with those snakes entwined, it's like this, I don't know, scepter of ultimate spiritual authority. Nergal commanding these unseen forces, the cosmos, the spiritual realm. It's huge.
It is. And you can't just ignore the way those snakes intertwine. It's not just for looks, is it?
Nope. No way. Blair makes that very clear. He talks about how that intertwining represents something much deeper, the interplay of opposites, all those dualities that shape our experience.
Like creation and destruction,
Yeah.
light and dark.
Exactly. Sickness and health, male and female, all these fundamental pairs. And Blair's saying, look, they're not separate, they're interconnected, they depend on each other.
Which then makes you wonder, how does that tie into Nergal? He's often seen as destructive, right?
Oh,
Underworld plague.
Right. So then you've got the serpent, often linked with healing and renewal. And you think, wait, how does that work? How can those two things go together?
Yeah, there's a paradox there.
Wow.
How does Blair address that?
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. Blair's whole point is that destruction can actually pave the way for renewal. Think about it. A forest fire, right? Sounds terrible, but it clears out the old growth, allows new life to emerge.
Okay, yeah, destruction as a catalyst for change.
Exactly. Challenges, even painful ones, can lead to growth. And remember, those entwined snakes are a classic symbol of healing. So you put those together, and suddenly Nergal's staff takes on this whole new meaning.
The ability to both inflict and cure, to understand the full cycle of life and death, that transformative power.
Precisely. And Blair doesn't stop there. He takes it even further, suggesting that those entwined snakes represent something even broader, the journey towards inner wholeness, integrating all the different parts of ourselves.
Okay, so wholeness.
Yeah.
How does he connect that to Nergal and, I guess, to us as well?
Well, with Nergal, Blair's saying it's like all his domains, war, plague, underworld, all coming together into this unified spiritual power, like integrating all these seemingly disparate parts of himself.
Makes sense. So how does that translate to us, to our own journey?
For us, Blair sees it as the potential union of masculine and feminine energies within ourselves, the reconciliation of conscious and unconscious, bringing those two together into harmony.
Like a balancing act almost. Finding that inner equilibrium.
Yeah. And Blair goes on to talk about the Serpent more generally, beyond just Nergal. He really emphasizes its connection to primal energy, renewal, that whole shedding skin thing as a metaphor for rebirth.
Right, that powerful imagery. Like the snake's always renewing itself, shedding the old, embracing the new.
And he even talks about the serpent's connection to Earth's vital force, almost like a terrestrial Kundalini energy.
Interesting. And having two snakes instead of just one, what does that add for Blair?
For him, it really amplifies that whole symbolism of polarity, the duality we were talking about. Two snakes, visually representing that interplay of opposites, the push and pull that creates balance.
And he even brings in the Caduceus, right? That symbol you see in medicine and stuff.
Yeah, the Caduceus. Blair, he sees it as having this deeper meaning. He connects it to the Ida and Pingala nidus, those energy channels in the body, the entwined snakes representing those channels, the central staff representing the Sushumna.
Ah, the Sushumna, the path to higher consciousness.
Exactly. So it's like
Yeah.
by integrating those energies symbolized by the snakes, you're opening up that pathway within yourself, leading to an awakened state of being, a greater awareness.
Makes you see the Caduceus in a whole new light.
Totally. And Blair, he touches on alchemy too, talks about how the serpent in alchemy represents transformative power, that force that drives spiritual growth, purification.
Okay, so it's not just about energy, but also about knowledge, wisdom.
Yes. He sees the serpent as having this deep connection to hidden knowledge wisdom. He even brings up the Garden of Eden story. You know, the serpent tempting Eve with the apple.
Yeah, classic story. But what's Blair's take on it?
Well, he suggests that maybe the serpent wasn't just a tempter, but a catalyst. Like, it pushed humanity towards knowledge, even if it came at a cost.
Interesting. A different way of looking at it.
And he mentions how serpents are often seen as guardians of sacred spaces, like they embody the wisdom held within those places.
Makes sense. They're often depicted as protectors, almost like they're guarding secrets.
Exactly. And then there's that whole thing about the serpent's movement, all fluid and sinuous.
Right, that serpentine movement. What does Blair make of that?
He sees it as mirroring the intuitive mind, the unconscious, where so much of our hidden wisdom resides.
So it's not just about the symbol itself,
Yeah.
but how it moves, how it behaves.
Exactly. It's all connected. And when you bring it back to that central idea of wholeness, Blair, he emphasizes the union of masculine and feminine energies within ourselves, that yin and yang balance.
Finding the harmony within.
Right.
Yeah.
And the reconciliation of conscious and unconscious, bringing those two aspects of ourselves into alignment. He even talks about that spiraling form the snakes create, seeing it as a metaphor for the cyclical nature of spiritual evolution.
Like we're always growing, always changing, coming back around to ourselves in new ways.
Absolutely. And Blair's quick to point out that this symbol, entwined snakes, it's not just some random thing. It pops up across cultures throughout history.
Yeah, you see it everywhere, don't you? Different forms, but the same basic idea.
The Caduceus, Egyptian cobras, the Indian Kundalini. Blair saying it's this enduring symbol. It speaks to something universal within us.
Like we're all drawn to that imagery, that symbolism.
Yeah.
It taps into something deep.
Totally. And finally, he brings in Jungian psychology. Talks about the serpent as an archetype, representing the unconscious, transformation, even the shadow self.
Right, all that hidden stuff within us.
And those entwined snakes, for Jung, they can symbolize the integration of those opposing forces within the psyche, bringing light to the darkness, reconciling those conflicting parts of ourselves.
Striving for that inner wholeness.
Exactly. And he even mentions a website, realdreaminterpretation.com, saying that entwined snakes in dreams can have significant meaning. They might point to inner conflict or the potential for union, for healing.
Wow, so Blair's really covering a lot of ground here, pulling in all these different threads.
He is. And it all comes back to that image of Nergal's staff. Those entwined snakes, they represent so much. Mastery over life and death, control over primal energies, duality and balance, transformation and healing, the journey towards wholeness.
It's amazing how one symbol can hold so much meaning, so much depth.
It is, and Blair's really making us think about the interconnectedness of it all. Those seemingly opposing forces, they're not actually separate. They're part of the same dance.
A dance that we're all participating in, whether we realize it or not.
So here's a thought for you as you go about your day. Think about those opposing forces in your own life. The light and shadow, the joy and sorrow. How are they playing out for you? And what potential for transformation, for healing, might lie in embracing that interplay? It's something to ponder, isn't it? Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Anytime. Always a pleasure to explore these fascinating ideas.